What if you dropped Mount Everest into the ocean? Let's say one morning you wake up, grab a cup of coffee, and decide you're tired of Everest just sitting there in Nepal. So, with a giant imaginary crane, you pick it up and drop it straight into the ocean. What happens next? First, Everest is big, really big. At nearly 9 kilometers tall and weighing about 350 trillion pounds, it's the largest pile of rock you could ever think of moving. If it somehow detached from the crust and you plopped it into the ocean, the splash would be unlike anything Earth has ever seen. Forget about cannonballs in the pool. This would be a mega cannonball. The initial wave could rise hundreds of meters high, enough to wash over nearby coastlines and erase entire islands in seconds. Countries thousands of kilometers away would see tsunamis smashing against their shores. Basically, beachfront property would become underwater property very quickly. But it's not just about the splash. Everest is tall, but the ocean is much deeper. The Mariana Trench, for example, could swallow it whole with room to spare. The average ocean depth is about 4 kilometers, so Everest wouldn't exactly be poking out of the surface like a lonely island. Instead, most of it would sink beneath the waves. The water pressure at those depths is crushing, but Everest is made of solid rock. It wouldn't just crumble apart like a sandcastle. Instead, it would sit there like an enormous underwater mountain. Now, here's where it gets fun. Dropping a mountain into the ocean means displacing a colossal amount of water. Imagine shoving a giant rock into your bathtub. The water level rises, right? Same principle, except now your bathtub is the entire planet. Adding Everest wouldn't raise the sea level by much, only a few millimeters at most, but the tsunamis from its impact would cause chaos long before anyone noticed the ocean creeping up. And what about the creatures living there? Marine life near the drop zone wouldn't exactly be thrilled. The shock waves from the impact would be enough to stun or even obliterate fish for kilometers around. Coral reefs would shatter, ecosystems would collapse, and for a while, the surrounding water would be nothing but a swirling mess of rock, mud, and bubbles. Eventually, though, new ecosystems might form on the slopes of underwater Everest. Think of it as the world's most extreme artificial reef. Whales could swim around its cliffs, sharks could patrol its peaks, and maybe a few adventurous squids would claim the summit as their new home. But wait, what about the Earth itself? When you suddenly relocate something as massive as Everest, you're redistributing an enormous weight across the planet. It wouldn't knock Earth off its orbit, but it could cause local tectonic chaos. Nearby fault lines might shift, triggering earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Imagine explaining to future generations that the reason their city is full of lava now is because somebody decided to throw a mountain into the Pacific. And then there's the human side of the story. Nepal would lose its most famous landmark. Thousands of climbers who spent years training to reach the top would have nothing but waves to scale. On the other hand, surfers around the world might celebrate the arrival of the Everest wave, the deadliest, most insane surf ever created. Of course, they'd have about 2 seconds to enjoy it before being completely wiped out. Over time, though, Everest would settle into its watery grave. Sediment would slowly cover its slopes, sea creatures would colonize its surface, and in a few million years, it might look like it had always belonged there. The ocean has a way of reclaiming everything. So, what if you drop Mount Everest into the ocean? At first, chaos, tsunamis, earthquakes, destruction, then adaptation, new habitats, new geological formations, and finally, silence. The mountain that once towered above the clouds would sleep beneath the waves, trading climbers for fish and prayer flags for seaweed. But let's be honest, if you really had the power to move mountains, dropping one into the ocean probably wouldn't be the weirdest thing you'd do with it.